Good morning and good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I'm just so excited today to talk about my favorite topic, which is manufacturing, but more importantly, not just agentic development, but agentic testing. And I'm joined by my wonderful colleagues from when I used to work at UiPath as well, which I'll introduce in a few minutes. But let's just get started for today's webinar. It's more about talking, not like, okay, what is a tool? How do we actually use a specific technology? But it's more about making sure that the manufacturing companies think about the testing risk as the more and more systems get introduced and all of that. So just to brief introduction about myself, I lead the strategic accounts. I'm an SVP of strategic accounts at Wonderbots. And I'm working with a lot of our partners. Today, I have UiPath as well. More importantly, when we think about the current world of manufacturing, nowadays, every plant floor is actually running more and more software than how they used to do from before. And the softwares are, of course, the standard MES, supply chain automation, but there are a lot more RPAs, robotics. And so as more and more software has crept up, the testing discipline hasn't really kept up with that change. And so today we'll talk about what is that gap like and what are we going to do about it and what we have seen with some of our customers as well. So with that, let me get started. With this statistics, these are not just statistics, but more about like what is the industry-wide inflection point that we see. So when we see the Ionix, data that says 89% of organizations are increasing the AI testing investment, and it is becoming more and more default approach because it's not an experiment. And why does that actually come? Here's another statistic. So IDC actually says that 72% of the developers that actually use the AI, they had to do more than 40% of revision. So when we think about it, okay, why do we have to do that? Because there is an assumption that AI is doing a good job of writing the code. So now where do we go from it? So let's use the same AI to also do better job of verification of that code. And as we make sure that more and more code development is happening faster, more and more testing burden is actually happening. And so when we actually think about it, how do we keep up with it? Same tool set, same AI and agentic is how we've actually helped and seen the customers doing it. So when we see the third statistics here, that is what PwC is actually reporting, that 92% of the teams that measured quality, they saw fewer defects in the code after actually they implemented AI in software development lifecycle as well. So when it's done right, agentic testing isn't just faster; it's actually significantly safer. And the reason for that is, again, we are trying to combine speed with validation so that the speed is not just actually creating more and more risk, but the speed is actually also getting validated on the testing automation as well. And this is my favorite picture here, because when we think about, again, the manufacturing companies, we have so many different systems. Of course, you're looking at some of the typical one, ERPs. ERPs are also getting modernized because they're moving from on-prem to cloud. And some of the other changes that we see, MESs are getting integrated, supply chains are getting automated with so many supply chain solutions on planning and ordering side as well. And then we obviously see the software robots as well as we see hardware robots and then the RPA. So there is just so much continuous software updates that happen, which are now essentially getting into AI-enabled operations. So when we think about it, each one is individually manageable, but most of these softwares and most of these systems are layered on top of each other. So one is touching the supplier, one is touching the customers, but together they are touching actually on both ends of it. So more and more systems mean more and more integration points and more dependencies. And more places where one single change at one place actually can break something 3 systems down. And in specifically manufacturing plant environment, it can be a big problem because a lot of these software that even I worked, they are custom or they are very, very highly configured and not just off-the-shelf software that vendor can actually have easy regression testing with it. So that complexity curve is exactly what a static test script can't keep up with. And that's really what we are seeing. And this is the what we see. What does that do? So we've seen scenarios where downtime, where production will basically just stop. So as we all know, 1 minute of stop production can cost millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in many cases. And then more importantly, regulated industries like manufacturing, specifically pharma, CPG, food, aerospace, and automotive, if you have untested changes, that actually it's not even just about the bug itself, but it's also could be an audit finding that, hey, how did we make sure that we were able to do the testing, and do we have evidence of it? What not about just the defect that happened. And then there could be the lost output that could result from the downtime or some defect that can happen. So when we think about the throughput that is getting lost, it just doesn't get made up. It's gone, right? So the point is that we don't need to have the mindset that, okay, we'll test it eventually. It has a real cost attached to it. So the cost continues to compound. So that's the reason why we need to make sure that we are not having the testing and validation lag behind, but it is continuing to keep up with the change in the pace and the change of all the changes in the systems and software that they are dealing with. So that's how we actually get into the shift for why do we need to think about the agentic-led testing. So when we think about agentic-led testing, the traditional scripted testing, whether there are different software providers that do it, it's really built on the assumption that the applications that they are testing in many cases is staying static. But as we just talked about, it doesn't happen, especially in the manufacturing, where the custom apps and MES screens and other workflows, they change constantly. They change based on the customer requirement or regulation changes, or more importantly, because of continuous improvement as well. So the scripts can actually break whenever any of those changes happen. So someone has to manually patch them. And until you do it, the coverage will basically stay frozen. So the agentic-led testing can flip this whole thing on its head, because agents understand the applications that they are testing. What is the context of that application? So they can adapt automatically when something changes, and they self-heal any broken test steps instead of failing silently and not knowing what is going on. So more importantly, as I said, when we do the agentic testing, they prioritize the coverage based on the risk instead of just, hey, every test case is equally important. And that's the shift from testing everything the same way to testing what matters most confidently and continuously. And that's what results into some of the results that we are seeing with our customers. We are seeing that the faster testing cycles for every release, and as with all the project management methodology, the releases are becoming faster and faster. Fewer escaped defects reaching to the production, and stronger audit readiness. So not just, okay, what happened with the defect, but what did we do so that we can have a proper traceability. So the headline here is not actually about, hey, what are we doing about cutting the testing cycle, but more importantly, we are actually improving the accuracy without adding any headcount. And that's why it matters more and more, because more quality and validation teams with new product enhancements, new product introductions and all that are stretched very thin. So it's not about replacing them, it's about giving them more and more leverage with this agentic testing. In this slide, it's very straightforward. You all can see it, but it's really the picture just doing the talking here. But when we think about it, a typical portfolio that is without agentic testing as a service, which is more and more manual and heavily scripted test scripts that are actually there. But more importantly, when we think about it, they are very thin on the coverage because maintenance is continuing to eat the team's capacity. So the agentic testing as a service, the balance really shifts towards automated and self-healing coverage. That's how, as we talked about before, the teams have more and more time to spend on exploration as well as any risk-based testing that require the human judgment and not just re-recording the broken script, essentially. And that leads to the finally the advantage of having one platform that actually is able to do a lot of these things together. So when we think about it, when we build once, that's obviously the best scenario. So instead of test cases that we would actually build different times and different systems for functional testing, for sometimes RPA validation, for performance testing. One platform actually can let you build just once and reuse for automation, reuse it for maintenance, and all of that we have seen 40% faster deliveries rather than the alternative approach. And so that's where, when we think about the compounding impact, it's actually very, very important because you are able to have the right time window instead of being squeezed by the schedule of the releases or the bug fixes. So governance and security, as well as the audit log, are very much embedded into the one platform rather than actually having bolted on one after the other, or after the fact we are trying to figure it out. So which ties it back directly into the compliance and exposure risk that we talked about. So with that, we have my friends from UiPath. I'll introduce them, and they will actually have some more things to share with respect to how they've seen some of these changes impact and the agentic into the testing and not just development as well. So let me start with the first question for you, Jenny, that some of our attendees had actually sent out. And I'll let you introduce yourself as you answer it. So the question that came in was, how has application testing evolved over the last 5 years, 2 years, and more importantly today? What has changed the game?
Yeah, thank you, Bhavesh. Hey, everybody. My name is Jennifer Quinn. Ajay and I are Team UiPath, and we focus specifically on the manufacturing industry with our offering in tests, agentic testing. So loved hearing, Bhavesh, all the excellent guidance from you. Absolutely spot on. So let me take that question. And really, I mean, over the past 5 years, most organizations have been trying to industrialize testing. But getting to the point we are now, it's been a journey. So in the beginning, there was regression manuals testing, and then trying to get CI/CD integration, more structured test management, et cetera. And the goal was to test faster, more simply, increase efficiencies and reduce repetitive work. But lately, in the past couple of years, we've seen that AI has really changed the dynamics of testing. So suddenly teams can now generate test cases, create synthetic data from scratch. Things that used to take them hours and overnight pizza parties are now able to be generated by AI agents, which speeds up test development dramatically, but it's still kind of that middle area of AI just helping. Now we're in the world of agentic software testing, where agents do not just suggest, they actually understand, they teach themselves, they plan the next steps, they execute work, they understand and analyze outcomes. And so humans are becoming more and more in the role of the superpower or the superhero to supervise, and the agents are actually helping scale automation and testing from soup to nuts in almost a lights off environment. So we've really seen a dramatic change. It's like moving an analogy from a handcrafted machine to a power tool to a smart production line. So that's kind of the analogy I would make. It's a very exciting time to be getting benefits from agentic testing, Bhavesh.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny, for sure. And see, I was telling you that I worked with Jenny and Ajay, who I'll introduce at UiPath, and they're both now manufacturing expert too. They've helped with so many customers' use cases and scenarios. So thank you, Jenny.
We miss you though, Bhavesh. We'll never know all the things you know.
No, that's fine. And so let me introduce Ajay. Ajay is actually also working in the same team and has a lot of solution architecture type background as well. So he has seen a lot of evolution throughout. So Ajay, when we think about it, what is the history of the agentic testing and how do you see the market today? And what is driving this shift from traditional and manual and RPA style testing, because that existed as well, towards the agentic testing right now?
Thanks, Bhavesh. And I'll kind of quickly introduce myself. So Ajay Jagtap, part of the go-to-market team from the UiPath Test Cloud. So to your question around the history of agentic testing, right? It's the agentic testing. I mean, if you think about the coining of that term, if you think about it, it wasn't present, I would say a year ago or a year and a half ago, but it didn't just appear overnight. It's been a progression, right? Because the first stage was, the classic automation, like manual testing, or where you are writing the scripts step by steps, and then, the user or the automation would simply, follow those steps exactly as it is, right? It was more task oriented, and it was something that, was time consuming as well. And it was rigid, right? Because if the UI changed, right? Let's say if you have creating an automation and if the UI has changed or the process has shifted, right? The automation would typically broke. Or it will essentially say, hey, this is something different, then it will just give you an errors, right? So from there, we moved into more like an AI assisted stage where tools could generate test cases, it could improve scripts, it can summarize results, or even recommending fixes, right? So it's like a feedback loop that it has created where it is not only useful, but it's still very, human led, because someone had to prompt it, review the output, right? Adjust and stitch the pieces together, right? So now we are moving into that agentic testing world where, AI agents essentially take on more goal-oriented or goal-directed work across the entire testing lifecycle, right? So they can plan, they can act, it can adapt and even escalate when you have some guardrails around it, right? So that's something that we have seen, the shift over the past year, and it means the market is shifting from tools that execute transactions to systems that actually help manage these quality outcomes.
No, that makes perfect sense. And yes, you're correct. So Jenny, when we go back to, so why does this matter, right? So I mean, of course, we're kind of saying that, hey, what is the shift and some of the reasons why is it actually happening? And we talked about it. So why do you think it's mattering even more and more? And what does it actually mean in the real practical terms for different manufacturing companies and other industries? Some of these are very transferable scenarios for other industries as well.
Mm-hmm. So I think, it means a lot. It's first in the context of RPA, but that's largely, it's really a confluence of things coming together. So releases are more frequent, systems are more connected, and change is more constant. So AI-assisted development is creating a lot more velocity in this whole space. So we're finding that, even the partners that we all as organizations work with are shipping new releases to us at lightning speed. I mean, we all know, Ajay and I have SAP backgrounds. If you are in that space, you know that, the support packs and enhancement packs came with a very structured cadence in the past. Now they're coming at us much more frequently in the form of S4 updates. And so it's created a dynamic where you need to step up as an organization to support the external productivity being delivered to you by your partners. And then also, depending on the space that you're in, you may have your end users asking for more and more functionality because they're seeing changes in their marketplace. So really just the whole velocity of needing to test has grown dramatically. So, but that doesn't mean the whole world has been supplanted by this agenda. There's still a place for the old automations. There's still a place for RPA. There's still a place for, the more sequential processes associated with agents, which is like creating test data for a test or auto healing, all those topics, which are in themselves capabilities, but they're now woven together, and the demand is that they go much more quickly. So I think the largest takeaway would be the demands that we have as QA organizations have increased exponentially, and we need to really be able to accommodate and support that capacity. because in order to stay competitive as businesses, not only do we need to do testing faster, we need to grow our scope of coverage vastly to keep up. So I just think net it's putting a lot of impetus on us to move to the next level, and so that we can support the needs of the business to interact in this the whole ecosystem of business and testing.
Yeah, no, that's the classic. You're right. So the definition you kind of gave a definition of agentic, which includes the agents as well as the traditional some of the RPAs and automation, which is the right approach because then the customers have best of both worlds rather than just having one versus the other. So both of you have a lot of SAP background and experience. So help AJ, maybe you can answer this question. Like how is agentic testing different compared to like a standardized ERP like SAP versus more importantly, we've all seen so many homegrown systems that are in a typical manufacturing company and they are custom built and in many cases very, very still critical as part of the overall workflow.
Yeah. So the ERP systems and the custom applications like the MES or the homegrown systems, they really create two different kinds of testing challenges, right? Because with standardized ERP systems like SAP or Oracle, for example, right, the landscape is more structured. You have transactions, you have SAP transactions, you have standard business processes, right? Now thinking from an SAP standpoint, there are SAP transports, there are upgrades, right, and integrations, right? What agentic testing helps you or helps our customer is analyzes the change impact, right? So if there's an upgrade, there is a change, right? It can analyze that change impact. It figures out which SAP transactions or business flows are impacted or affected, right? And based on that, it will generate relevant tests. It will focus your regressions, where it will also tell you where the risk is highest, right? So it will give you everything that's needed for you to have that level of confidence that yes, this is where the testing needs to be focused, right? And I have a complex structure, right, within SAP, but I have a good roadmap on how to go forward with it. Now, from a custom application standpoint, right, it's a different animal altogether because they are often unique. Yeah, they have, most of the time, as you may know already, they're undocumented, right? They either have, kind of information stored in a user's brain rather than on the documents, right? So it is by years of business exceptions, right? So the original developers may be long gone, right? And the logic lives partly in code, so and partly sometimes in old documentation as well. So in that world, agents help by reading whatever context is available, right? So you feed in that context, right? And then it also explore the application itself. So based on all this information, the agents will generate tests from these requirements, from these behaviors, and then turning this tribal knowledge into reusable testing assets. So with ERP or the SAP world, right, agents help you navigate a known but a complex landscape. But with custom web applications or custom applications, they're helping you build the map while you are testing the territory.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is a very common challenge that now we are able to overcome in many ways is because there are so many scenarios where the custom developers are not there. Nobody knows how the code was. There was no GitHub or anything else that was documented either. So it's a true challenge that now we are able to overcome, not just from the testing side, but from the application itself as well with this agentic testing. So Jenny, can you, a lot of people are nowadays talking about the dark testing factory.
Yes.
Have you heard about it? I mean, I'm sure you have, and you actually worked on it too. What does that light out testing, end-to-end testing cycle actually look like in practice?
Yeah, and hearing even this whole conversation, even my big tagline is it's never been a better time to be in testing. It's so exciting, the kind of capabilities that I know at UiPath, our new messaging is around this concept of a lights dimmed situation where agents take over the entire process, and humans interaction remains critical for those decision points that need to be interjected for like some kind of situation where something stops and there's a decision tree. Those are all very valuable human needs. And that's why there's no such thing really as AI replacing everyone. Humans are just promoted to the superpowers, as I mentioned before. But what's great to see is, processes that took 20 steps, conceive the test, write the test, get the right data, refine the user requirements. Oh, this is wrong, let's fix it. It was a we used to use the term, I've been in manufacturing for longer than I care to admit, Bhavesh, not my first rodeo, and I used to sell CAD CAM, and we had this concept of throwing things over the wall, where I feel like I get a lot of that vibe in the old world of manual or even agent-led testing, because there was no orchestrator of the process. But now what we see is, instead of a 20-step process being knitted together by humans every single step, that is all enmeshed in a complete flow handled by an agentic agent, supervising all those things, working together, doing an immediate self-heal where the humans are notified, they invoke the process, and at the end they step in if there's a need, or not, they get the completed product where the agents have been able to determine a self-healing situation or a need for a fix it on their own. So it dramatically condenses the test cycle. And so we are using this term, which is common in manufacturing, of a dark factory. Now, some people feel like, oh my gosh, am I ready for that? But the reality is there's different variations on that. There's dim lights, et cetera, but it just reflects the productivity and really the quote goals that I think agentic testing has, is to lift all the manual rote work off the humans themselves, do the analytics, and create condensed cycles and velocity, all on their own, with humans just interacting where necessary. So it's really a great development for our business world to see the levels of efficiencies we're gaining through this. But there's different ways you can participate in that. You don't have, maybe some folks are like, I'm not ready for that. Well, agents and agentic can still do a lot for you, even if you don't want to do that lights off.
Yeah, no, 100%. So on that note, I have a related question, Ajay, for you. So when we think about a lot of customers that have existing automation investment, they have RPA. So can the agentic testing that we've been discussing work alongside the RPA and other tools that the organization may already have? How should they look at their existing investments that they have, and how do they leverage it rather than kind of throw it away because it's something else is not there?
Yeah. Agentic testing doesn't throw away existing automations or whatever investments that you have done with the RPA world, because in a lot of cases it actually makes them more valuable, right? Because as you said, right, most organizations that at least we work with, they already have useful assets sitting around the RPA workflows, the automations, whether they are UI automations, API automations, right? In the process, they build reusable components. They build data utilities, right? They have the orchestration infrastructure already been set up. What agentic testing does is it reuses and extends those abilities, right? Those capabilities, right? Because existing automations become the machinery inside the testing factory that we are talking about, while agents kind of help decide when to run them, how to interpret the results, or where the gaps are, and where the maintenance is needed, right? So just I kind of talked about before, right? It kind of creates that feedback loop, right? So so the value isn't just replacing it, or replacing the existing work that you have done. It's just kind of turning this isolated automation assets into a more intelligent quality system, right? Because the automation stops being a pile of tools in a garage, rather than it starts acting more like an equipment on a production line that we kind of talk about.
No, that's the perfect analogy. Thank you for that. So Jenny, when a company is, let's say, listening to this and they are getting excited that this is something it's worthwhile for them to do, how should they think about it? What foundational pieces do they need to have in place before a serious conversation about, hey, how do we do agentic testing would make sense essentially?
Yeah, good question. I mean, first of all, and it's just like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So largely you're in this webinar maybe because you are having testing pain, which is pretty much ubiquitous, but some people might argue they don't. If there's no pain, there's no reason to have further conversations. Maybe testing is easy. It's not common within your organization, but largely people are looking into Agentic because it's painful now. Because of the points I mentioned earlier, not be able to keep up with the business strategies of their companies. Maybe you're a software development company and your developers are going nuts and you have to keep up on the QA. We're talking to a company now that's really needing to superpower their QA organization because they can't keep up with the brilliance of AI, what AI is enabling their developers to do. So you need to assess your organization. What are your pain points? Are you concerned about reducing costs? Are you concerned about not getting or test coverage? Are you having errors in prod? Those are all the the nasties of not doing testing well. Then you need to really have a kind of a platform or some kind, like you need to get the solution in place to help you. There's data aspects now with the right platforms. A lot of the things that you might think you need to do on your own can be developed by an agentic testing platform. The ability to curate those tests for you. Like for example, at UiPath, this isn't a sales show for us, but we have heat maps and we can tell you where you're missing tests, where you have tests, et cetera. So understand where your testing situation is, where you need coverage, and then getting you need to have security in place. Again, we hear, I'm just speaking off the cuff of all the things I hear, I do this for a living. Some people are like, oh no, we're just going to vibe code our way to enterprise success. And that's challenging because security, governance, those are important concepts. I mean, you're betting your business on these testing capabilities. So you want to be clear, if you want to go try that, fine. Maybe it's cheap. You want to have the right guidelines in place. And you need ownership. Largely, it's great to have someone who's in charge of testing throughout the organization. That's not always the case, Bhavesh. You could have separate QA groups, but it probably behooves an organization to get alignment within their organization on who has this need, who does what, how can we get the most benefit. If for example, taking out cost is one of your big guardrails or big metrics for how you want to assess an effort, pull everybody together because you can get one platform that does it all and you can really start crossing off line item spend. A client we had talking to yesterday, basically they had about 30 different vendors. Believe this is very common. We worked with some huge companies. This company is not huge. They still had spend going out in every direction. They basically said, okay, we're going to get UiPath, or insert company that you want. And then we're going to keep with one other specific industry testing system. They're a government contractor. We're just going to get rid of the rest. And imagine how delighted the CFO is. So just get alignment around those things. If you need help, you can go reach out to Bhavesh. I'm sure he'll guide you. But that would be my thoughts, Bhavesh.
No, that's perfect. I agree. Again, having led supply chain, I know the pain in the vendor management as
Right.
well. The simpler you can
Yeah.
do, the better it is, and you are more tighter aligned as well. So no, I 100% agree. So Ajay, when we think about, let's say they've made a decision that this is something that they want to do. So what are some of the questions specifically that IT and applications testing leaders they should be asking before evaluating that, hey, this is what, like a type of change that Jenny mentioned that they are trying to do?
It kind of extends to what just Jenny said, right? The pain points, because I would rather push all the the stakeholders and the leaders to ask some of the practical questions before doing anything else, right? Because where does like for example, where does testing actually slows down, right? Today, right? That's something that they should ask internally, right? As in like, which releases create the most risk, or how much of our regression testing is still manual, or which tests are automated but expensive to maintain. So all these questions, right? It has to be asked internally, within the team, whether it is a QA tool or the QA team, or whether the entire the business or the line of business, right? So they should ask which systems are truly business critical, which workflows would hurt the business, or if they fail in production, what's going to happen. So with all that, right, before buying any technology, leaders need to get clear on the operating goal. It's again, I usually like to have analogies, right, attached to my talk track, but it's bit like joining a gym, right? You don't start by picking up the equipment. You start by asking whether you are trying to build a strength or you are trying to improve your endurance and stuff like that, right? So the answer changes the whole plan based on all these questions that you ask internally.
Yeah, no, that is so insightful. I 100% agree. So, Jenny, before we go into the questions from the audience, that the new questions there may have been, one more question I wanted to ask is, what is the one thing that a lot of the organizations actually underestimate or overlook when they are starting this journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really the knowledge concept. So people often think that agentic testing is mainly about AI or the automation tool, but really it's the bigger issue is context, Bhavesh. Agents need reliable knowledge within an organization. So really you need to know that your company is going to be able to have the right resources that can step up and provide that knowledge. It's not always neatly documented either. So there may be, again, getting back to the point of some kind of champion within your organization that can go and solicit those key data points from folks and kind of making sure that someone who's strong enough to avert that we've always done it this way type of reaction, which is common. Let's face it, change is hard, but we need to think of this as the next generation, as many evolutions of technology and revolutions in businesses. You need to have a new perspective. And the best implementations do not stop humans from getting involved. As I mentioned, they often step up in the value chain. They're more in the area of a superpower and less involved in the babysitting or in the actual knitting together of sequential processes. So it's really, be able to step up and address adversity, but know that the greater goal is worth the trip and worth the effort, because really we all feel this every day in our organization, even at UiPath. Like we're now doing AI assessments for each of us, as even in our own roles. Like I use AI extensively every day. I can't imagine not using it. We all need to adapt to this new world and not be intimidated, to embrace the power that it gives us and know there's a higher goal, a higher life form in the role that we're serving the company because of these supporting structures of agentic and AI. I mean, I couldn't be more thrilled to be living in this time of technology, frankly.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of fast-paced changes, and that's why this is becoming even more and more important, that the changes should be in the entire ecosystem and not just one aspect of the world, right?
Yeah.
So Ajay, since you also work very closely with a lot of manufacturing, there was a question from the audience that basically asked that why is manual testing still so common in manufacturing and maybe even in several of other industries, despite so much investment in automation?
Because going back to the point where Jenny said, right, like usually all these processes are not documented well, right? They stay in people's heads, where it's either a champion or some sort of subject matter expert who's knowing this entire process, and he or she are the ones actually doing that manual testing or providing the steps. So manual testing is still present largely in most organizations because of the same reason, because the process is not documented correctly. And this is where as companies evolve, right? Because when you talk about a testing maturity, right, it starts from manual testing only, right? The stage one is always manual testing, and then comes the automation, then comes the AI augmented tools, then it comes to more like an autonomy, and then finally the dark testing factory that we were talking about. So to answer your question, right, the manual testing is still going to be part of most organizations, but we have seen that shift. People where you are utilizing AI, right? Either capturing through through the documentation, through flow diagrams, through wireframe diagrams, and converting that information into an automated test.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
can I add one thing on that, Bhavesh?
Yeah.
I think also what we've witnessed, and this is, really, we're excited to report on the AI and agentic capabilities, but I think the tendency is many of the manufacturing systems are very old, right? A lot of them are old, like from the Mapix days, or in some of the old solutions that were generated or developed 30 years ago. And I think people don't realize that even those old technologies can move into the AI world. There's capabilities that AI has to grab on and automate those. And I think sometimes people just don't know that. I think the message really is like, open the kimono and let's see what your current state is. And you might be surprised at the things that smart technology firms can automate, that you have in your manufacturing asset library there. So I would just add that comment.
No, thank you for that. So the question is then, you kind of talked about it, but maybe this is for synthesizing that. How is the agentic testing different from automated testing? Which one of you? Okay, is it?
Yeah, I can take that, right? So agentic testing, as you're talking about, right? It's run through AI agents, right? Where AI agents essentially have more intelligence around the process, around the steps or the task that's been given. So for example, right, like if there is, take an example of SAP, like if you're running through a transaction and there is some data that you entered and it kind of popped something up that was not originally part of the automation or the entire process. Usually the automation fails because it knows that there's a pop-up. It doesn't know what to do after that because it's not given any kind of instruction on how to tackle that. Whereas agentic testing understands there is a pop-up. It looks at the pop-up, it says, okay, it looks like there is some sort of a checkbox here that I need to click on it and then move forward with it, right? So that self-healing aspect of it in these cases, right, the agentic testing would actually take over and kind of go through that entire process of testing the entire process, and then it will test and make sure that everything is run smoothly. And that's just a part of it, because agentic testing not only heals or does the automatically understands the business process, but it can also generate test cases, right? So if you feed in information like, hey, this is a document or this is a flow diagram, just convert that into a test, right? And that's something that if you do it manually, it takes hours, if not days, right, to build something that up.
Perfect. So there is one more last question, unless some others come in. Maybe you both can talk to this. What advice would you give to organizations trying to build a business case for the agentic testing?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a smart pursuit because it's a competitive time. No executive is going to sign off on anything without a clear view into the bottom line impact. So but I think it's important, whoever you seek for guidance or if you know much about agentic yourselves is, get with an expert that understands what agentic really means, because it's a broad term. Ajay just illustrated several key aspects of it, but there's so much utility from an ROI perspective that agentic testing can bring. And it can also depend on the applications you run. Now, we see SAP a lot in the manufacturing community. There's tremendous abilities of agentic to support SAP testing. So the way that, as I mentioned, we have some assets that help you based on an impact analysis to determine what executables will be impacted by a change event, an upgrade, an operational bundle you're putting in internally, and tell you the exact test scope. You're going to save, anywhere from 60 to 80% off your testing just by having that crystal ball. That's one aspect of agentic for SAP. So my question would be, know your environment, know the applications. Those would be two critical things. And then either become an expert or find an expert that can help you assess, okay, this is my current state. How can I expect that agentic will hit the needle for me? And then it can be very easy to understand the various line items that go into the ROI, whether it's reducing the test scope, increasing test coverage, increasing efficiencies. Some people are looking to take out costs, like I mentioned earlier, cost reduction. I want to cross off 20 of my vendors. Good, nice working with you, no hard feelings, but we're trying to reduce spend. That's the directive from our CFO. So I think it's important to know your goals, know your environment, and then unless you're an expert yourself, which maybe you are, get some guidance on assessing that. You can ask AI for some tips, but and vet them. But, really it's very easy to come up with a justifiable payback when you look at the dramatic ways that the AI and agentic testing are changing the way we test. That's how come we're even able to talk about a dark factory. It's a paradigm shift from, I'll say, from as little as 6 months ago now. That sounds crazy, but I bet people would raise their hand and agree with me if we did a poll.
Yeah, no, thank you. Ajay, anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think Jenny pretty much covered it, right? Because yeah, that's how we have seen our customers kind of building their business cases, right? Because agentic testing is something that's here today. It's not like it is future. It is here today, right? And that is because it matters, because testing has gotten too complex, and that it is too fast moving for teams to scale just by adding people or writing more scripts. So agentic testing is helping that, expanding that coverage, and cut down the manual efforts and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I think this is like a perfect agentic timing as well. So we are right at the end of the time slot for the webinar, and we don't have any more questions. So I think it's well done. Thank you, Ajay, and thank you, Jenny. So for everybody who is on the webinar or will be watching this recorded afterwards, this is basically Ajay's and Jenny's and my LinkedIn QR code if you want to get in touch for any questions or anything you want to brainstorm. We are actually all about sharing the thoughts, sharing the ideas, and helping each other, challenging each other. So we love doing that. So happy to do that. Any last minute comments, AJ or Jenny, you want to make before we wrap it up?
I just want to thank everybody for spending time with us. It's been a real pleasure, and thanks for having us, Bhavesh and team.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so with that, let me just leave you with this, right? That as the manufacturing and other industry systems get more and more complex, and more importantly, more and more AI driven, the testing has to actually keep up with it too, and become an agentic, or the risk of missing something or having a downtime will only grow. So thank you for joining us, and keep the dialogue going.